to the third episode of Sisyphus Complex Solution. I thought I'd start off by letting you enjoy the new t-shirt. Well, it's not that new, I've had it a few weeks now and that, but highly appropriate and makes people really raise an eyebrow when they see me in a supermarket, because they think it means something else. But never mind, I get the joke, so it doesn't matter. So, I hope everybody's been keeping well. There's not been that much in the way of feedback from the second episode, but oh well, such is life. We'll move forward anyway. What I'm going to be doing this week is spending a bit of time initially on the actual Sisyphus complex solution, and some pieces of work that I've been doing this week which are considerably more involved than it will appear, and then moving into Foethan, which will be a little bit more involved than the previous two episodes. But what I want to do this time, similar to what I did in the second episode, was to get things going by a little bit of a tip towards a couple of other shows and a couple of other points of view for you to be able to use as future reference. You might want to get other people's opinions on things. So I wanted to show the first conversation at the top of the screen there, and that which is a show called Triggernometry, which is a British show run by a couple of guys called Constant Kistin, something like that, I can't remember, and Francis Fraser, I think they're called. It's easy to find anyway. Triggernometry is the name of the show, and they had Bret Weinstein on again. Sorry, not again, for the first time, but it's the second time I'll be mentioning him. And the reason why I've brought this one up is A, because it gives a bit of a plug to Triggernometry. That is, it's a reasonable show. The guys are not quite on my wavelength in terms of political opinion, but that shouldn't really matter. You don't really need to have the exact point of view to listen to somebody. But the interesting part around Bret, I'm going to stop using his surname, is that he's actually started to think around political solutions for himself, which in and of itself is a good thing, and it's something that everybody should be doing. And that how are we supposed to be looking towards the solutions going forward? What are our options? Who's got the best ideas? And all of this type of thing. Now, what Bret has come up with is something called the Unity Project, which he gives a little bit of an explanation in that particular episode. There's more details on his own YouTube channel. Now, it's interesting enough. Like I say, it's good that people are having a point of view, and obviously this guy is very much academically minded. A reasonable thinker, it's fairly safe to say, I think, and also considered to be part of the what's known as the intellectual dark web. Now, the problem that I've got with his particular idea is that he's suggesting that you find a moderate from the left and a moderate from the right. So in American terms, one from the Democratic Party, one from the Republican Party. They reach an agreement to stand together, whereby the first 4 years will be run by whichever one of the two individuals will stand as the president, and in the second term, the other one will then take over. Now, to me, this is very much that's very much liberal politics, really, isn't it? You know, let's everybody be inclusive and happy clappy, and it'll all work together. But the fundamental problem there is the fact that the entire purpose of being either a Democrat or a Republican is that you don't see eye to eye on one very core function, which is the size of government, and particularly around taxation and things of this nature. So how exactly they would be sitting there as a unity option, I'm not entirely sure how well that would work in reality. I also have one other issue around this, which is that all political parties around the world are basically showing their true colours, whereby they can't really be relied on, which is one of the reasons why I'm suggesting the Sisyphus complex solution, so that individuals can come together and form a new type of politics based on what citizens actually have come to agree on. The problem with having established parties coming together is the only kind of example I can give. It's like saying that I've now opened the door and a burglar has come into my house, and now to make sure that we have some level of equality, I now need to invite in a rapist for the wife as well. Doesn't seem like it's the best thing to be suggesting as far as I'm concerned. So that's my opinion. Obviously Bret will be able to defend his own opinions quite well. And, you know, it's just something for people to think about, the different options that are out there. Then on the lower video we have James Delingpole, who I think is quite brilliant. He's not all there all the time. He's not for everybody's taste, but he is somebody that will stand by his principles. And the one thing that he's been particularly, or should be very well noted for, is James is the guy that informed the world of ClimateGate, and Mr. Michael Mann and his Hide the Decline and all the rest of that so many people have just decided to completely ignore. I mean, these were issues between a few different entities, but I mean, as far as the UK side was concerned, at the University of East Anglia, and the people that were working together with Michael Mann, I forget what their names are offhand, it's easy to look it up. These were deceptions of a criminal level. How it is that people have not been held to account for that is just beyond me. Now, the reason why I've put up this particular picture is that the guy next to him is a fella called Donal Blaney, who is a lawyer. He is, or does call himself essentially in that like a conservative, but it's becoming very wavy really in that as to what constitutes being a conservative these days. On the whole, it is a case of conservative just basically means having a bit of bloody common sense. I always think that they have had, but it's becoming particularly noticeable these days. Cheers, by the way. Now, Donal was a really good interview because, and there's going to be links in the description to both of these videos, by the way. Donal was a good interview because as much as he's a lawyer, he's not up his own arse. He doesn't talk in jargon. He's very, very straightforwardly spoken, and he's got a good perspective in terms of some of the areas of being able to take things forward, and to particularly look at things from the legal perspective, as it would be as, you know, being a lawyer. Because I tend to think that the legal perspective is going to be a very important tool in being able to turn an awful lot of things around. Donal is known to a number of people in the UK for his assistance of a young fella called Darren Grimes, who was the young guy that the was it the Electoral Commission tried to, essentially, that they were going so far as to try to put him in prison for putting together a campaign for Brexit, in support of Brexit. And the poor kid was put through absolute hell. I mean, I think he's only something like around about 25 years old now. So the way that these people maliciously went out to try to attack this young lad was absolutely atrocious, and Donal really did step up to the plate and helped him out. And so I think Donal is somebody that is worth listening to, and there is something that is going to have a common link to Donal a little bit later on in the video. So a little bit of something in that for you to be investigating for yourself, should you wish to do so. Right, so let's get in a little bit to the purpose of all of this. Now, you're not going to be able to see all of the detail on this screen by any stretch of the imagination, and I will make a little whinge of my own to say that the amount of work that I've had to put in this week to put just these couple of slides together has been ridiculous. Considering I'm just like everybody else, I've got my own work to do, and that in regular hours. So spending my evenings putting this stuff together and then going through everything one by one and making sure it was all put in the right place, you're not going to see it, you're not going to be able to appreciate it, and that's why I'm stating it. I've worked bloody hard on this, so pay attention to the actual point, which is so small but is still important. Now, if you remember last week, I ran through what the government looks like and that, and we ran through the website and all the different ministerial departments, all of the agencies and all of the rest of it. And if you remember how I mentioned that the size of government, considering especially that we have a Conservative Party in the UK, the size of government is absolutely enormous. Now, the reason why I've gone for the title this week of the trick of illusion is that it kind of sets things up a little bit, and that for two points of psychology, whereby if something is laid out in what is appearing to be a transparent fashion, and all of the government departments, all of those agencies, now that's what's listed here. That's what's on all of. That's what this particular graphic represents. It's all the different parts. So at the top of that are highlighted in green, those are all the ministerial departments, and then down below that they're separated by the agencies. Obviously, my ugly mug is covering over a few of them, but you understand. This is then to show what all that list looks like on a single page, which is why the documents that I'd put together previously and that I ran through in episode 1 kind of demonstrates how difficult it is to be able to do this sort of CEO version, I just want a one-pager type of thing. And when we're looking towards developing things in a much more process-based fashion, in terms of being able to understand what it is that we're referring to, making sure we've got all of the details together, it's this kind of format is what we're going to be looking towards doing. Something that looks a little bit like a governmental bill of process for anybody that understands that. Now, the point of doing this is that when I've run through this one by one, I wanted you to take a good look at the graphic, not trying to concentrate too much on what the detail is, but how complex that picture actually looks. And then from a psychological perspective, think about why would government be in such a size to begin with, and what's the relationship between all these different things, and just how complex it can appear when put in this format. The psychological aspect of that is, again, it's to make government look considerably more important and complex than it is. That's not to say that it isn't complex as a whole anyway, irrespective of how big government is. There's lots of issues that everybody has, lots of things that you need to run a nation. But you can look towards making things seem a little bit more important than they actually are. Now, what I want you to pay close attention to is I'm going to move this over to another slide, and I want you to try to notice the difference in complexity. Right. Obviously, you can see the number. It's quite clearly stated. It's down by 40%. So, just in case you weren't quite ready, I want you to just notice this once again. So I'll go back and watch again. Right. Now, what is this showing? Two things that this does. The first thing is that you can basically make the entirely correct assumption that I have just literally reduced the size of the UK government by 40%. And I haven't done actually anything at all. All I've done there is remove the doubling of mention. So if you remember from last week when I was running through and that, especially down towards the end, there was a list of 411 agencies. A very large number of those agencies are already listed within the ministerial departments. So it's created the illusion of being considerably bigger than it actually is. So it's government playing a little bit of psychological, I won't go so far as say warfare, but you know, it's playing games with your mind really, and that to make you think that they're bigger than they are, more important than they are, and for you to be a little bit more cautious in terms of how you approach any kind of issues that you have with government. The larger the size that something is, the more intimidating it can appear. So the first step that we can do is just literally reduce the size of government by taking out the duplication. And there were, in certain instances, triplication of departments and agencies. So it's a little bit sneaky as to what transparency can do. Now, as we're going to be moving forward as well, that we're going to actually start to understand how far transparency goes. So I spent a bloody long time putting that together. Hopefully that does give a little bit of an impression as to some of the tactics that are used. And the one thing that can be used to kind of reverse that psychological attempt of intimidation is that when you're looking towards reducing the size of government or making government more efficient, that's the most important thing. I mean, a lot of people worry when you say reducing the size of government because they think, well, okay, damn, you're cutting things that shouldn't be cut, and you know, somebody that's got particular special needs and that is going to have more problems. That's not what we're doing, at least at this stage. Not to say that we're going to be targeting bloody disabled people or anything like that, but reversing the psychology here is that once you've undertaken a very, very simple process where in essence you've done absolutely bugger all, you can look to see, well, I've reduced government by 40% immediately with no effect on anything at all. So it's taking that first step to say, well, okay, that hasn't caused a problem at all. What else is it that we could look at that would actually make this map work better for society as a whole? So it works with some people, it doesn't work with others. I mean, you'll have some people just sort of look at that and go, well, so what? Doesn't matter. But others that have got that very tentative nature to be able to take that first step to look towards how you restructure and how you start to envision what kind of changes can be made, and if you can make some reductions, this small psychological step can help. So I wanted to be able to demonstrate that in a very quick and simple fashion. Right, so one more step that I'll take today in terms of the Sisyphus complex solution. We have the most recent budget numbers. Again, there's a link in the description where you can get the full budget file. I've just taken 2 of the pages, expenditure, receipts. The thing that's of importance to me here is to demonstrate the level of detail that we get in budgets, which to my mind is not anything like how a budget should be presented at all. I understand that when somebody's sort of standing at the dispatch box and you want to give an overview of all of the policies that you're making, policy changes that you're making, for example, and you want to be able to limit the time because literally going through every single item might be a bit of a problem. That's something that you should be doing essentially as a Q&A afterwards. But within the documentation that is presented, I would expect considerably more detail than this. Like I said before, I think in the last episode, I would expect to see a proper, fully listed department by department expenditure. That's not what we get here. But what might be of interest to some people is the listing down of the different sources of receipts. I don't think everybody is entirely as well versed in where all the different revenue comes from government, for government. It's obviously income tax is a massive contributing factor, but when we look towards the cause effect, what kind of policies, so for example, if we do have tax policies later on that we start to develop, you're going to be looking towards variations that are going to take place on this list that you need to be able to model out. Not so much model, but because we know that what models are doing lately, we need to be able to make sure that we've got the very best possible indication as to what is going to be taking place, and working out a budget that is performing in a way that does something a little bit better than this. What I've highlighted here are the total expenditure, total receipts over this 7-year period. Obviously at the moment, so that we're in third one along. What is quite apparent is that in each of the years they're spending more than they're receiving. This is lunacy. You do not run a government in this fashion where you're literally, I mean, I've very seldom seen anybody, particularly mainstream media, run through things to say, well, hang on a minute, why are you not trying to balance the budget? Why is it every year you're planning your budget to be able to spend money that you don't actually have? Now, I understand how certain infrastructure projects can require certain levels of funding that, yeah, you might need to just raise that bit extra for a small period of time, the smallest period of time possible. But the way that I would manage a budget is that for a nation, because I know that some people don't like the fact that you have the old, because I've got old Margaret at the front of the episode this week, people don't really like the analogy of running a nation's budget in the same way as that you would a regular business. Well, okay, in that circumstance then you separate between your standard operating expenses and your receipts, and then you have a separate statements which will say, okay, these are the infrastructure requirements and this is how much is going to be needed for each of those projects. So we need to be looking towards having what is known as retained earnings from the main budget to be able to finance those infrastructure projects. Because you have to remember, we've already got massive debt as it is. At a later date, and that when I start running into more detail around budgets, I'll start narrowing down on those figures. But having things laid out in such a way that people actually understand it an awful lot better than they do at the moment. And so that it's laid out in such a fashion that the money that they get from you, this is the one thing that I really can't stand when people turn around and say, oh, well, it's government money. It's not government money, it's your money. You should be paying attention to when somebody is spending your money. So things should be laid out in a much more transparent fashion, and that you can then have the opportunity to say yes or no. Do I want my money spent in that way? Let me know. Ask me. Lay it out correctly and then ask me and I'll give you an answer. Obviously not on every single occasion, and I think we all know by now and that's with varying opinions of people across various spectrums, you're never going to end up with 100% agreement on things, but you have to go with the majority decision. But more importantly, when it comes down to things like infrastructure, so HS2 in the UK would be a particularly good case. Do the public think that it's actually worth doing? I won't give an opinion on HS2 on this particular opinion, on this particular moment, but that's just a kind of an example as to how things can and should be taken forward. So that's another part of the process, the thinking process, as to how we take this step-by-step look at what the government is, so that we can start to be making decisions as we're moving forward as to how we would actually want government structured, and being a little bit more accountable to the general public as a whole, providing the type of information that you've got the choice then to actually become much more informed as to matters of value to the whole country. It does play a part that, I mean, there's a very big conversation at the moment as to how much culture plays a role in the nation, and how you've had this long march of the far left, and how culture is playing such a significant role in their ability to take over so many different institutions, which really should never be entering the political sphere, especially this kind of political sphere. And if you have all of the right information and the right method of collating the information, the right method of transparency and engagement with the people that want to be engaged, then I think we can start to have a method of overriding an awful lot of the nonsense that gets spoken by the people that are playing a role in this long march. So again, it's just to get your thinking cap on, get you understanding some, I mean, we're in very basic elements still, and considering things as we're moving forward, where we start to then look towards department by department, policy by policy, and develop that entire map, replicating the John Hoskins map. So that's the stage that I wanted to get to with the Sisyphus complex solution today. So I'm now going to move into the faux FM. Now I've got a fair few notes on this one because it is quite important, because I'm going to be concentrating on the United Nations first of all this time. Now, if you remember in the last episode, I was asked the question as to would I include the World Health Organization as well, and I've explained how that covers all of those little tentacles within it. But what I haven't approached too much as yet is give them some level of justification as to why I have such a deep loathing for the United Nations. There's a range of reasons, but I want to concentrate on one that is particularly egregious, and so I'll be referring to a fair few notes on this one. So I wanted to give you some justification before we start breaking it down and what all the different tentacles are doing and why I disagree with it and why the certain people that are in charge of these things should never be in charge of turning on a light switch, let alone a bloody international organisation. So this is an important one. Some people may not be aware of this. It was very widely reported at the time. You can see the date there from the article in February of 2018. There are a range of different problems around this that I do have other information around this as well, but there's only certain levels of information I want to go into. But this particular report was very, very important, where it identified that there were 3,300 paedophiles responsible for 60,000 rapes in the last 10 years. Now, if you remember last week, I had mentioned from the detailed financials for the United Nations itself. They had stated that they have control of 44,000 employees. Now, I will be looking into more details around that because there's levels of uncertainty as to whether that's the claim, because I think that they're slightly disingenuous with the claim there, because I think it's 44,000 making up the entire organisation rather than just the United Nations itself. So if we considered that 44,000 people are employed by the United Nations, 3,300 of them are found to be paedophiles, you're looking at 8% of the workforce being paedophiles. Now, to get that number of paedophiles within any organisation, it would have to be in the fucking job description. That is a phenomenal amount of criminal scumbags to be determined in one organisation that pretends to be the saviours of the world. I mean, keep in mind, this is an organisation, and again, I've put some links in the description around the Great Reset and their intentions to work together with the World Economic Forum for this global governance program. So, I mean, having an organisation that has aims to govern the world that would hire 8% of paedophiles, these are not people that should run a bath. These are people that should be put in prison. Simple as that. Because it's not just, and here's the key problem to this, and you'll be able to see a little bit more example of this as we go forward. It's not just a matter of the people that are actually performing these disgraceful criminal actions. It's the people that are covering for them and that are doing absolutely bugger all about it. Now, if you remember back to the beginning, I'd made mention of the video with James Delingpole and Donal Blaney. The link to this is that Donal Blaney has a firm called Griffin law. Now, one of the senior people at Griffin law, so there's Donal on the one side, the guy next to him, Andrew MacLeod. This is the man who provided the dossier that brought about this information. So again, this is further reason as to why it's important to listen to when you come across conversations from people like Donal, and if you see reports from the likes of Andrew MacLeod, these are people worth listening to. Now, for him to have released this dossier this is the kind of bravery that people often speak of and seldom follow through. So I wanted to very much highlight that particular aspect of this, because I don't think people get the I don't think the right people get the level of accreditation and thanks that they truly deserve. So I wanted to highlight that in particular. Now, the thing about Andrew is that, and here's where I'm going to be reading from some notes, by the way. I want you to get a bit of an understanding as to some of the stuff that he does. He has specialisations, including things like international shipping, but here's where the law really comes into effect: war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Now, what more pertinent person could we use right now than somebody that knows these things? Now, there are other areas of interest where, if you notice when I put into the description, a link in the description, I've put in something called the Future of Civil Society project, which was put together by the World Economic Forum. Andrew was an advisor to that particular document, so there could be additional information that maybe at the right time, in the right circumstances. You never try to push somebody into something that that their involvement could have been entirely innocent, because this is kind of the thing that you have to link between the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, where certain people come in and they are effectively playing a role of that larger Great Reset program, but not necessarily aware of it at the time. They can go in there with a whole range of different good intentions, and like I say, when you've got somebody that is prepared to release this kind of information, you don't question the motives. So he had worked with the United Nations, obviously, where he was an expert, part of the expert group on responsible business and investment in high-risk areas. An understandable role for people to be taking on. Now, where it seems he does gain access to an awful lot of the type of information that's led to this disclosure about the extent of pedophiles and rapists within the United Nations, is that he worked at the UN's emergency coordinator. He worked at the chief of operations, of the UN emergency coordinations. Fuck me, my bloody words won't come out. I'm better off doing this without reading it. He was chief of operations of the UN Emergency Coordination Centre in Pakistan. So, we are talking about somebody that has had the right kind of access to be able to make these kinds of disclosures. So this is to emphasise the validity of the disclosures that have been made. Now, within that World Economic Forum document that I've referred to, I have noted that they made a particular mention, because they list all of the people that were involved in the production of the document and the production of the, well, if you call it a study, whatever, or the plan. It seems to me they put out something that's a little bit of a get-out clause in case any lefties want to do their usual to try to deny everything. Because rather than, of all the different roles that they could have stated that Andrew was participating in at the time, they decided to list him as the General Manager of Communities, Communications and External Relations at Rio Tinto in Mongolia. Now, if you're not familiar with Rio Tinto, it's a very large mining and minerals company. They're the sort of company that you'd end up with the same type of scenario, that whenever you try to make any comments about the people that are involved in the global warming nonsense, they say, oh, you know, you're being sponsored by big oil. They always forget the fact that the whole thing was started by people from big oil in the first place. They think that if somebody comes from a particular sector, it automatically disqualifies them. They're able to demonise that particular individual. I have a feeling that listing him as being involved with Rio Tinto is one of those methods of having somebody that the people from the far left can just say, no, we dismiss all of his claims. I have a feeling there's that kind of reasoning behind it. But that would be my guess. Perhaps Andrew could say something different. Now, what I do want to point to here are some of the very specific statements that were made in the disclosures from Andrew. And you might have seen in the little bit of the article that was able to be viewed there. This was presented to Priti Patel when she worked for the Department for International Development. Obviously, she's now within the Home Office. Even if you've been in one department and shifted over to another, I would expect people to be, well, it refers to it at the bottom, in the bottom statement. You would expect people to be holding on to that knowledge and pushing it. Now, there could be a very particular reason why. There's been some conversation recently in that of the Department for International Development being merged with, I think it might have been conversation to have it merged with the Department for no, I don't think it was International Trade, whether it was in the Home Office or something, I can't remember. But I think they were looking towards actually getting rid of DFID. And if that is the case, if there's something in the works that suggests that that particular department is going to be shut down and amalgamated with another one, the fingers crossed perspective there is that it would be looking towards removing some of this fund, some level of development, of removing funding from the United Nations and having a little bit more accountability over things like this. That's the hopeful perspective. Whether it's actually going to take place or not, yeah, we're going to have to wait and see, until, of course, we take over. But they can't deny that at the higher levels of government, this information hasn't been made aware to all of them, is the key point that I'm trying to make here. Now, I do like the particular statements, and this is the reason why I put them in there, is, you know, to give you how these people abuse their position. That, you know, I mean, if there's the guy walking around that's got a UN badge on, or the UNICEF shirt, or, you know, the United Nations logo on the back of the yellow vest or whatever, and I'll even go into it at the right points and that, the white hats and what have you, because there's an awful lot of crap that happens there as well. And then there's also reference to the aid industry as a whole, because when this came out, this wasn't just referring to the likes of the United Nations and their various tentacles, the UNICEF and so forth, there were issues around the likes of Oxfam. And again, this is one of those parts where I'd made some reference to it last week, that some of the charity sectors, you really do need to be careful as to who it is that you're giving money to, because some of these people are all involved within the, some of these organisations are involved in the same type of activities that the United Nations are involved with. So be very cautious whenever you're looking towards, if you are the sort of person that wants to be generous and give to various charities, look into the background, look into any issues that they've had, anything that they've been associated with. It's normally as simple as just putting in the search engine and just put the name of the organisation and put the word scandal at the end of it. See what comes up. Okay. Like I say, at a later date I may do another segment that is based around charities, because there are an awful lot of them that are doing this kind of thing, that are involved in this. So this is giving you some idea as to why I really do not want our country, or anybody else's country for that matter, to have involvement with the United Nations. Now, one of the excuses that I think that will be brought up is for them to say, well, the people that have come in under the name of the United Nations, there might be those, those temporary people that come in to deal with natural disasters, things of this nature. They're not proper sort of employees that we get to have proper oversight with. As far as I'm concerned, that would never be an excuse anyway. But should anybody ever say that kind of nonsense, I'd like to give just a couple of examples as to why that is not true. Now, here's the first little scumbag at best. I mean, here's where I probably should be making use of having that parental advisory at the beginning, because these fucking people. But anyway, I thought I'd be sure to show the picture that shows this particular pedo with Mr. Blackface, Mr. Justin Trudeau, the atypical, the social justice warrior, prime minister, president, whatever the fuck he is. Yeah, you know a hypocrite when you see them. Now, this particular piece of shit, yes, he has been caught, put in prison, all the rest of it. But prior to that, this is somebody that founded an organisation called Street Kids International, and was considered to be a leading authority on working children, street children, and war-affected children. Yeah, I bet. And his particular role within the United Nations was with one of their tentacles called UN Habitat, particularly in Afghanistan. Now, when we talk about child trafficking around the world, this sort of piece of shit is going to be assisting that kind of nonsense. This sort of arsehole, and that should be questioned an awful lot more whilst he's serving time. So let's move to another example as to why it's not just some temporary face. There's another one that was actually caught, because like I say, so many of them are not. And what I've got here is Peter Newell, and managed a charity that received hundreds of thousands of pounds. And again, this is when I start pointing out, when you're looking at government departments and how they're all linked and things of this nature, and that same process applies to the United Nations, and it should apply to anything that you're looking at. Because sometimes you'll come across an organisation that on the face of it, everything looks all hunky-dory. Just have a look at where they're getting their money from, who they're involved with, things of this nature. Build a map up of these things. So this guy was getting hundreds of thousands of pounds from the NSPCC, Barnardo's, Save the Children and UNICEF. UNICEF again being one of the tentacles of the United Nations. So his role within UNICEF, he wrote a manual on children's rights. Fucking incredible. And he was the coordinator of the Association for the Protection of All Children, known as Approach, until he resigned in 2016. So when they tell you that it's just some fella that's turned up on a temporary basis, oh, we didn't know, nothing to do with me, Guff, not my problem. We've put in all of the best practices. We check all these people. We do this, that, and the other. You just let them get away with it, though, don't you? So it's not just some person that comes along from time to time. At least not in the extent that is continuously associated with this organisation. So you would think that when these kinds of disclosures take place, that people at the top would say, we have seriously got to do something here. We have really got to get our act together. If we were talking about a genuine organisation with genuine people who really give a shit about anyone at all, they would be doing everything within their power to put an end to this kind of thing. So this is the response that you got from Antonio Gutierrez, the top fella at the United Nations. Another fucking socialist, another failed socialist prick. I'll give more details when I break down the departments onto exactly what this fella is. So obviously, is this just a part of the graphic? I'm going to read out some of the other stuff that was included within the article, which is again in the links in the description. So he's proposed to stop paying countries that fail to investigate claims against their soldiers. They say it's only the soldiers, in a timely manner, and to put that money instead into a trust fund to assist survivors. He also wants all United Nations personnel to attest in writing that they understand the policy against sexual exploitation and abuse, which includes paying for sex. In addition, he intends to develop a new set of rules to prevent sexual abuse by peacekeepers. Again, it's possibly including prohibitions on the consumption of alcohol, because yeah, having a drink turns you into a paedophile. There's a very specific point that I want to make about this. Well, a couple of points. First thing is what should come out of anybody's mouth above anything else is shit a brick, we've got loads of pedos, we are going to be going through with a fine-tooth comb, we are going to be arresting everybody. This is our responsibility, we're going to be arresting all of the pedos. That should be the first statement. Simple as that. That doesn't happen with these people. The second part to this is around this suggestion that they will stop paying countries that fail to investigate claims. First and foremost, it's your fucking organisation. Investigate it yourself, notify the authorities in the organisation, and then root out and arrest the bloody paedophiles. Not difficult. Don't turn around and say it's somebody else's responsibility. It's your responsibility, Gutierrez, you socialist prick. And to say that you're going to stop paying countries. This is an organisation that the member countries pay them. So his solution is, I'm not going to give you your money back based on some bullshit programme or other that we're fobbing off as being meaningful. I'm not going to give you your money back if you don't solve my problem. So they create the problem that you have paid for, and their punishment will be to take your money away from you that you gave them in the first place. You see how this works? You see the level of bullshit these people try to do. And the media will report this and go, well, oh look, they're taking steps to curb this 8% of their workforce being paedophiles. There is no mention of we are going to do everything that we can to arrest all of the criminals in our organisation. When people are talking about all of the different problems that are going on around the world and all the various agendas, and you'll have like the stuff over is it Jeffrey Epstein, and there's the Maxwell daughter that's in prison at the moment. How about having these people put in a cell and questioned? What role are these people participating in? Because the extent of child sex trafficking around the world, this is not just done with the involvement of a few criminal organisations. There is facilitation at high levels, and it seems that everywhere these people go, everywhere that they're located, all of the programs that they're involved with have links to all of this. So this is why I have a very specific problem with this organisation, and everybody else should have a problem with this organisation. And like I say, as much as I will continue to break down where all of the problems are with all the different departments and who the various pieces of shit like this Gutierrez are, it shouldn't really take that level of detail, but I'll do it anyway. But you need to understand as to where I'm coming from, as to why my money, your money, everybody's money should not be going anywhere near these people. Okay, so this is what I wanted to. This is the point I wanted to make about the United Nations today. This side of things is trying to bring the level down a little bit now. As much as, again, I don't like the World Economic Forum. I don't like the fact that they are performing a coup d'etat of the world. And so, as I said, I would start to identify all of the companies that are members of the United Nations, so that on some level we can do this on the basis of name and shame, because some of them are absolutely bloody disgraceful. Obviously last week's one with Alphabet, Google and YouTube itself, with their antitrust farce that took place this past week. There are levels of scumbag. This week I wanted to bring Toyota in because they are a member of the World Economic Forum, and I wanted to do this on the basis of I will demonstrate their wrongdoings, at least some examples of their wrongdoings. But I'm going to give I'm doing this one early because I'm going to give an admission that no, I don't work with Toyota. I have no connection to Toyota. They don't sponsor me with anything. I have no contracts with them or anything like that. There is no direct relationship between me and Toyota. But I do have a little bit of a bias that I want to be able to let you know about, because it's, you know, I can't be saying to everybody, well, look, avoid these companies, don't have anything to do with these companies, at the same time as I'm sitting back and going, I hope this company removes their membership so I can buy their cars. You know, it's, I can't be a hypocrite. And the reason why I've got a picture of that particular car up, that's a Lexus SC430. In case anybody doesn't know, Lexus is the, I'll go with a snob expression of this. It's the premium brand of Toyota. That's my Lexus SC430. That is my car. So this is the part of where things become not so much difficult, I suppose, than that, but where we all have to have recognition. And you know, I can't sit here and make criticisms of people, say, well, don't use this service, don't use that service, when I myself have the same problem that everybody else does. There are certain times in that where there are certain services that you either have to use or that you have a particular preference for. So we can identify what the problems are. We can identify the problems within the company. The thing about it is that we can hope that some of these companies see the light a little bit. And I'm hoping that Toyota see the light on this one, because not only do I like that car that I've got, but my dream car, my next intended consideration purchase, is the Lexus LC500. So yeah, it's bias on my part. I want Toyota to be better. I want Toyota to get out of the World Economic Forum. I want Toyota to make this in a hardtop convertible rather than a soft top. I have that bias. So I wanted to give that bit of disclosure as to why I'm choosing Toyota this week, and yeah, just give that bit of hope that all of us can do, really. And that, I mean, we can also, because I mean, obviously I have to go to the garage as well. I mean, I go to the Lexus garage. I have the work done on my car, and you can say to people like, well, can you get the fuck out of the World Economic Forum, please? So, and you can do that as an employee as well. Look into all of these different details as to what your company's involved with. Have a word with the guys in Toyota. Little message for the people at Toyota in Japan. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Zehi yamete kudasai ne. So, what have they done? Now, this is one that was rather well known. And the key problem here from Toyota was the time frame, because you'll notice from this article it's got a date of 2014, and the start date of this 2009. So you're looking at least a 5-year period where known problems, and there is some clarity in this as well, where the FBI, that really did make the push on this one, they did specifically state that the problems with the unintended acceleration were known to be deadly problems with their vehicles. And yet they continue to make them anyway. Now, there has been a couple of other articles that I'm not going to include in the description because I'm essentially dismissing them, that have made claims that it actually wasn't the car's fault, it was the driver's fault. I won't entertain that. And I certainly won't entertain it on the fact that if you're working for a company where you've paid out 1.2 billion, you don't do that when you know that you're innocent, because some of the claims are based on kind of like black box recorder data. It's a car, it's not a fucking aeroplane. So it was something that they did wrong, and it was something that they did wrong over a long period of time. Now, I do remember at the time that the chief executive, as much as it was very much late in the day, he came out and made a public apology. He didn't do it in quite the way that I would have liked, in so much as that he said that the company was trying to grow faster than they could actually cope with. That's no excuse. But they paid out. They paid out. But this still came at the expense of quite a number of people's lives. I haven't got the figure with me at the moment. It's there were a number of people where they came to like what do you call them? A T crossing. That's an American term, isn't it? T junction, whatever, doesn't matter. But where they're looking towards stopping, and that's where you have to obviously in that stop and look both ways. They'd reach the end, think they're putting their foot on the brake, and the car would just fly off straight over to the opposite side of the road and run into walls. People died. So whenever you're doing something that is causing fatalities, there's no admirable quality about that. There are going to be other automotive companies that I will be picking up on as things go through the process and through these disclosures. But as much as I do have that bias towards Toyota, I won't run away from the problems that they've had and continue to have, because it goes back again, and that's these links with these with how, I mean, in this case it's not a paedophile, but sexual harassment and things of this nature, which, believe me, the story goes quite a bit further than just sexual harassment. That people are just not, they don't deal with it properly. Obviously, Toyota being an international company, this is taking place out in South Africa, and there is a statement that is included in it. I have got, again, link in the description, and you'll be able to see within there that there's a statement where it says, and again, this is from September 2019, the particular guy that they're talking about was not even suspended to separate him from the victim, that he carried on as normal, whilst the women that, well, the women that were making the accusations and all of the other women that were aware of what this guy had done, and like I say, I think the implications here are more than harassment. Nothing's done. Nothing's done to him. He just carries on as normal. No suspension, no criminal prosecution, nothing. Now, just because a company's they've got their headquarters in Japan, it doesn't mean to say they shouldn't be aware of what's taking place in all of their offices around the world. And when you've got somebody in your organisation that is committing acts like this, you clamp down on it, you stop it, and preferably, if we are dealing with proper criminal actions, you get the police involved. You have the guy bloody arrested. You don't give him a fucking promotion or just let him go about his daily business. So again, work for Toyota to do. above all things, is leaving the World Economic Forum. So this brings us towards a little bit of closure. Now, when I'd said previously that we wasn't really going to be making policies, decisions, making suggestions, I don't know what to put them on, being very specific as to the determinations as to how we take things forward, what kind of implications it would have, and etc, etc. There are going to be occasions where we can come across particular policies where we should be able to all come to some level of agreement. And so I'm suggesting at this stage that we have 3 policy developments that we could put in stone. It's going to, again, it's down to everybody else to provide the feedback and say yay, nay, any variations in between. But I would and will be suggesting that for everything that I end up disclosing, that we do leave the United Nations. The positive parts of that from a UK perspective, go back, check in the links in the second episode to find how much your own nation would be saving. But in terms of the taxpayers of the UK, for the United Nations alone, now again, when I'm starting to go forward and into the other different departments and tentacles of the United Nations, this total will be added to. So essentially on that alone, we save the taxpayer not far off 100 million. That's money that could be spent on far more important things. Okay? So, if we go back to the beginning and think, right, immediately, just by removing duplication, we've reduced the size of government by 40%. One simple policy, we've reduced the expenditures by 100 million. These things will start to form a picture. The further we go into it, the more we will end up with something where everybody can say, shit, this makes sense. We're actually doing what government should be doing. So, my suggestion as a policy development, because obviously in that we can't turn around and list them as terrorists as such, because that wouldn't quite be legally correct. But we can list the World Economic Forum as a national security threat. And the reason why we can do that is because of their publicly announced Great Reset programme, where they do include, as I've previously demonstrated, an intention for global governance. That's a coup d'etat. That is somebody who is threatening the security of your nation, and as such they should be listed that way. Okay? The third one should be plainly bloody obvious to anybody, but it shouldn't take a great deal of understanding for people to understand that we put in the policy that is made considerably more clear than it is obviously been taken at the moment, where all paedophiles, and include fucking rapists as well, that they be pursued, arrested, punished to the full extent of the law. That is a part that I would go into in more detail when we do come across the various considerations of law. Because when you do come across people that you hear some of the sentencing and how sometimes it's ridiculously light sentencing. I don't give a shit what the circumstances are, to be perfectly frank. If you are fiddling around with a child, you're in for life. End of story. This isn't a cultural problem. And that is something that, again, will be disclosed as we go forward with the United Nations, because that also plays a part in some of the programs that they are actually putting forward. Like I say, I'll disclose that in later editions. This should not be a matter of debate. So, with those three particular policy developments, I think that we should be able to agree on. Like I said, feel free, make your opinions known. If there's anybody out there that thinks that the paedophile one needs to be dealt with in a particular alternative fashion, don't be surprised if my stubborn nature comes out to say, nah, fuck off, mate. It should stand. So, that pretty much is enough for episode 3, I think. I've probably sworn more this time, but to hell with it. A lot of the subject matters deserve that and more. I will be ending the programme the same as I did last week with the Moirai directory. Again, I will stipulate that none of the companies listed are paid advertisements. It's not necessarily an endorsement as such. It is just purely the fact that these companies are doing the best that they can to run their companies, make a living for themselves, create jobs, provide the best services. If you'd like your company to be listed, providing that you can absolutely guarantee, and trust me, I will be keeping an eye out, provided you can absolutely guarantee that you will not have your company pushing any other agenda other than what your company's purpose is, then there's a link in the description that says that you can request to connect to me on LinkedIn. Let me know the details of your company. If you make the guarantee that you won't, say for example, you won't be putting some bloody advertisement for Black Lives Matter on there, because I'm not interested in people that want to propagandise for a communist organisation. If you can guarantee that you won't do things like that and you're just going to concentrate on what you do best, I'll more than happily include you at the end of the show. So, thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll have something interesting for you again next week. And take care. See you soon. Bye bye.